Medical school interviews are such a crucial moment for you to kind of advertise yourself to medical schools and show them why you're ready to study their course and why you're their ideal candidate. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Jackery and I'm a student studying in London. And in this video, I just want to give you guys some tips for your medical school interviews. Whether you're about to sit them or you're just trying to prepare ahead of time, you should hopefully find some things in this video that will really help you feel a little less anxious and just slightly more prepared. For reference, I'm set to study medicine at UCL, so hopefully that should give you the reassurance that I've experienced this and I'm talking as someone who's gone through the whole process and has kind of picked up some things along the way. As usual, timestamps will be in the description below so you can jump around and find exactly what you're looking for without wasting any time. Tip number one is to do as many mock interviews as you can. Now if you watch my video on kind of my journey to applying to UCL and getting my offer, you'll see that I do quite a lot of interview prep with one of my friends who applied to dentistry school, and I genuinely feel like the hours of mock interview prep that me and him both did really played a big role in helping me get into medical school and helping him get into dentistry. Now when you're doing these mock interviews, it's very important that you try and mimic the style of interviews you'll face at medical school. If you do a quick Google search on the university that you're applying to or the one you got an interview from, you should very easily find the style of interviews that they do. Now some medical schools do panel interviews, some medical schools do MMIs, which are more role play based. Depending on what type of interview you're gonna have, try and tailor your revision to that. This is really important because if you know that your interview is going to be an MMI and that it's going to involve things like role play and scenario based questions, and all you practice for is traditional panel style questions, then come the interview date you're going to be faced with questions you haven't seen before, which can really make you a lot more anxious. I know for me, all my interviews were online, and for that reason me and my friend would literally log on to Zoom and just do a conference call and ask each other questions, because we felt like this was the best way to make ourselves more natural in front of a webcam and not seem as stiff. We were both quite good at kind of articulating ourselves in person, but because our interviews were online, we knew that we had to kind of prepare for that. And I definitely think that by doing mock interviews, when I did my actual interview, I was more prepared and there were less surprises along the way. Now the second tip is more so for those who are really anxious about getting a bad interviewer who's going to try and mark them down, and that's to understand that the interviewers in your interview actually want to see you do well. Understand that if you've been offered an interview, then what that means is they've read your personal statement, they've had a look at your kind of profile, and they think that you're someone who they'd like to offer a place to. The interview is almost like a formality where they use it to kind of get to know you better and to judge whether or not you truly are as you say in your personal statement. So for that reason, understand that once you go into the interview, you're already at an advantage in that the medical school think that you're a potential student for their school. Understand that it's in the university's best interest to get good students, and so the last thing they're going to try and do is try and catch you out or trick you in the interview to give you a fail or not give you the offer. Your interviewers are really nice, and I know for me personally I was really stressed out about this, but when I entered my UCL interview, the panel was so friendly and straight away I had this really good vibe where I was just more comfortable and a lot less stressed. Tip number 3 is during your interview, don't be afraid to ask for extra time. A common misconception that a lot of students hold, and including myself when I was applying, is that if you ask for extra time when you're asked a question, then it's going to seem like you haven't prepared enough or you haven't really taken this seriously. When in reality, this is further from the case. A lot of the time in the interview, you're going to be faced with a question that you just haven't prepared for. Bear in mind, they can ask anything. And yes, you will get the typical questions that are kind of obvious, like a lot of unis might ask you why you want to study medicine. But at the same time, they can throw you a complete curveball and ask you a question you've never heard before. And in those instances, instead of opening your mouth straight away and just waffling everything on your mind, which by the way is going to sound extremely bad, especially if you're really stressed out by the new question, then you're just going to be shooting yourself in the leg. Instead, take about 10-15 seconds to step back, obviously after asking for some time. So what I would do is whenever I saw a question that I wasn't too confident with, I would literally ask the interviewer, is it alright if I have some time to think about it? And every single time I said that, they were more than happy to give me that time, and they reassured me that I was allowed to think about it and plan my answer before I spoke. Doing this can also really help you avoid the risk of answering a completely different question. In the heat of the moment, you can be asked one question and then accidentally answer a completely different question without realizing. Instances like that make it really difficult for the interviewers to mark you well, because even if you gave a really good answer, if you haven't answered the question, then they're still at square one and they haven't gained anything from that. I think a lot of people who hyper focus on that whole concept of answering straight away will hear a question and they'll think, oh, this sounds very similar to a different question I answered during my mock practices. Let me just use that answer, copy and paste it, and just say it as I memorized it. When in reality, it will rarely be the case where you'll have a cookie cutter response ready for any one question. Every question will require some flexibility and for you to kind of adapt and improvise on the spot, and that becomes a lot easier if you're honest with yourself and with the interviewer and you ask for extra time if you need it. Tip number 4 is to understand that it's alright if you're not 100% confident and you are feeling the nerves quite a bit closer to the interview date or on the interview. Yes, there will be some people who seem so well put together and who seem very prepared, but the reality is, and trust me when I say this, everyone is going to be stressed to some extent. They might not show it, and it could just be that it only really kicks in as soon as they enter the interview room, but the reality is that no one is 100% confident. And understand that interviewers know this. They don't expect you to be this student who feels no nerves whatsoever. They understand the magnitude of applying for a degree and how stressful medicine can be. So naturally, they're not going to expect you to be perfect. So understand that it's alright to be nervous, it's alright to be a bit twitchy, but that you shouldn't let that overshadow the hard work that you put in and let that stop you from really smashing that interview and doing as well as you can. Even if you feel like everything around you is going wrong, I can assure you that most of the time, as you enter the interview and as you get into the flow, you're definitely going to feel a lot less nervous. I remember at the start of my UCL interview, I was quite shaky, I was really stressed out, and a lot of the times I felt like my voice cracked and things weren't going the best. But as I kind of went through the questions, and literally after even the first question, I felt so much more comfortable and I felt like I'd gotten into the flow. So understand that no matter how stressed you are, if you prepared enough, then you'll find that after the first question, you'll kind of feel a lot more comfortable. Another thing that I feel like will kind of help you feel more comfortable with interviewers is to do your interview mocks with a range of different people. So like I said, I kind of had like an interview buddy who we do a lot of interviews together, but I'd always mix it up a bit at the same time, and sometimes I'd do interview preps with some of my teachers or even some of my mentors. So what that really lets you do is it stops you from getting too comfortable with one person, and it kind of forces you to always be on edge so that you don't get too complacent or too comfortable and relaxed with one individual. Tip number 5 is to simply be yourself. Now, like I said, if they've offered you an interview, that typically means they like you as a candidate and they just want to get to know you a bit better. So when you get asked a question, especially very personal questions like why medicine or why you chose to study at their university, try not to give a textbook cliche answer, and instead talk about your own experiences and think about your individual answer and how you genuinely feel. Don't try and sound overly smart or calculated, because a lot of cases that can come across as very ingenuine and you almost seem a bit robotic. If they ask you a question like why our medical school, and your reasoning is because they're very prestigious and they have a high ranking and that their student satisfaction score is really high, then say that. Don't try and give a random answer like 100 years ago there was a surgeon who attended the university and they were really well renowned and whatnot, because the reality is they're going to see through that. They're going to know that you're just trying to show off the fact that you've looked at their history or whatnot, when in reality it's not a genuine answer. Instead, just stay true to yourself and be yourself, because that's the best thing you can really do for yourself. Also, just very quickly bear in mind that these interviewers sit through a lot of interviews, and so if you give a very generic or boring response that's a bit scripted, then chances are they've heard it many times before. But if you talk about your own personal feelings and your own personal experiences, then chances are it will make you stand out a lot more, and you'll also sound more passionate when talking about it, which again will really catch the attention of the interviewers and make you stand out as a really good candidate. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. So if you found the video useful, you enjoyed it, then leave a like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're about to sit your medical school interviews, then I wish you the best of luck. And if you have any questions about something I mentioned in this video or maybe didn't mention, then ask below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. That's been all from me, and goodbye.